So believe me, we spent a lot of time carefully constructing this panel so that we would have different points of view represented and engaged with each other. And I'm just going to make a comment as somebody who's listening, which is that it seemed to me like it sounded like the only people who were worth paying attention to in Greece was the working class. And since, except that it was mentioned that the movement there was inspired by the Seattle Revolt, which was a broad movement of not necessarily only working class people, and I think it would be useful in your next round, at the same time that you're addressing each other, for you to talk about other movements, other people, and where they fit into the perspectives that you're talking about. So I'm going to just go to people in the same order. You can sit if you'd like. The videotapers have to take that into account. And we'll just try to, in 2 minutes, pick a salient point, and then you can worm in the rest of your arguments when you're answering people from the audience.
It's a technical issue that is being put up against us to force us to make decisions. The critical issue is the memoranda. They want us to take the austerity measures that they want to implement. Why? Because they want to restrict labor unions, because they want to restrict popular movements, because they want to restrict, because they think that this way they will make the Europe more competitive in terms of in the global markets. Other point I wanted to make is Lapavitsas. Lapavitsas Plan B, essentially, and the Greek exit. It's a very sound, extremely sound proposition that he is making. The problem, though, is that he is discounting the importance of the popular support. A Greek government right now, left Greek government, could take Greece out of Euro tomorrow. I would be very happy with, I would be fine with that. The question is, though, what would you do when you have 70% of the population supporting staying within the European Union? You lost them. The issue is, can you stay longer? Fight the fight. Can you radicalize this part of the population to the point where they realize that they'll be better off outside and then take them out? Doing it now would be the wrong time, in my opinion. Coalition government with the independent Greeks. Again, we have to be very pragmatic. I mean, there are a lot of things that we want. We can get some of them. The day of the election, when the elections happened, the numbers came out this way, that Syriza had two choices. Either we'll form a coalition with some other of the parties that had enough votes to get the majority in the parliament, or would have to call elections. Again, popular sentiment was against elections. If Syriza failed to cause elections, failed to call the election, failed to form a government, then the command by the president would go to the second party, and who knows what would happen. Actually, without Syriza, you wouldn't have a government. But anyway, so the question was, would Syriza want to force another election? That would be very anti-popular. We would lose the moment again. So, from the remaining parties within the parliament, who could they vote? Who could they form a coalition? Well, the other party was Potami, which are liberals, ex-social democrats, who knows what, people who are not clearly anti-austerity, not clearly against the memoranda. So, would we prefer to have a coalition with them? No, because they are more democratic. I don't even believe that they are more democratic than the independent Greeks. Yes, there is a problem with the independent Greeks. Against is the time, the challenge of time. Give us more time to do the right thing, to get more popular support and more popular, the public on our side. And, you know, all these coalitions are formed and they can, break any time.
Okay, I want to say that I've given Natasha a little more time because she's got maybe a unique position here, and I wanted to be sure she had time to explain it, but that doesn't go for the rest of you.
Natasha raised a very important issue about the coalition. It should be, there's an element of that to what I think it's correct. At the same time, we have to say that it's an unstable foundation on which this government is standing at the present time, because at the critical moment, even though ANEL has agreed to support the Thessaloniki program nominally, at a critical moment, they could pull the plug. And the key issue as well is that, so it has to be highlighted, with a view that if we're going to a new election, if the government stands firm, it should actually, which will make it enormously popular, hopefully we would win. But the point to highlight is the criminal, abstentionist, ultra-left position, the sectarian position that KKE, the Communist Party, has taken. It's a scandal. It's a scandal, unprecedented in many ways. They could have actually moved this government to the left if they had called for support to say, we will critically support on the basis of a united front policy, that's a Leninist policy, and so on, and calling and say, we will support parts of your program and we also will fight for further steps and so on. Would have actually moved Syriza to the right. Their abstentionist criminal position opened the door for actually the Syriza to say, the leadership at the moment, to say that they were unfortunately, so we'll have to work, because what's the alternative? The alternative would be, yes.
I'm going to ask you a question, okay?
The alternative would be to actually allow new democracy.
I'm not stopping you, I'm asking you something. There are some people who say... okay. I'm addressing a question to Alan. There are some people who say that Syriza did not sufficiently press the KKE to make the unification. And I think the answer that you may give is, well, KKE has a long, rotten sectarian history, which means they would have never entered the government. But I guess it is a question whether you think that the Syriza leadership took a moment to sufficiently press the KKE to enter the government and then expose them if they didn't.
I think that I'm not going to speak about their subjective intentions. I don't know what, but Tsipras repeatedly, actually, he said that we're in favor of a left unity government. Repeatedly has said he called for a left government. He specifically asked Kutsumbas in the Communist Party to support. The first day he called him. Kutsumbas refused even to meet him on the basis of this political earthquake has taken place in Europe, and they put their noses up in the air, saying that there is no change. And so on. This is the kind of Stalinist lunacy that you see. This is the same, by the way. This is the same, by the way. It's the same party that until recently, until its recent Congress, actually had the position of endorsing any democratic bourgeois capitalist government that would come to power. Actually, they were part of the government. They actually participated with the government of a new democracy in the 80s and in the 90s. They actually had ministers and so on. And now, in the face of a left government, it's almost Dostoevsky, and in the sense of the fool of Dostoevsky who's going crying in the weddings and so on. But it's a criminal policy that they actually are going to pay very dearly in terms of the consciousness of the masses in the next period. One thing has to be said about the KKE, however, unlike Andalusia, is a mass party with real roots in the working class. Its leadership has a criminal policy, but it has a real mass base and so on. Andalusia is a little flea that actually split in the face of events. As part of Andalusia when supporting Syriza, quite correctly. Another part, after repeated zigzags where they didn't know whether they were supporting what and so on, they remained within prisoners of their phraseology of the previous period, and so on. And it has to be drawn, this line of, about who are the real players and who are people who are, like forces that actually represent very little in the reality of the consciousness, the reality of the struggle. Okay. So that would be something to take into account.
Yanni a little extra time to
Sure,
answer that.
Of course.
And you're finished. Okay.
Is this working?
Yeah.
Yeah. Andalusia's strength is never has been electoral. There are some unions where Andalusia has more support than Syriza and the Communist Party. So people cannot dismiss, an organization like Andalusia because
it's 2 or 3, Yanni. 2 or 3 organizations. It's not.
Well, it's also
you misrepresented here.
It's also the anti-fascist movement. But also, I wanted to talk a little bit about what Aaron said about how since 2012 there has been a slowdown in the struggle. Let's not forget that since then we've seen, since the murder of Pavlos Fyssas, an anti-fascist explosion in Greece that has put half the leadership of the Golden Dawn in jail. Since then, when the government shut down illegally the channel Ert, thousands of people came out onto the street, and Dimar, one of the parties of the memorandum, had to leave the government. Now, I wouldn't call this a low level of struggle. A slowdown, sure, in the face of these elections that everybody's been waiting for. But we need to ask also the question, we've been having this debate, did Syriza unionists and the Communist Party unionists put the brake on attempts to start strikes that lasted more than 24 hours? Yes. In fact, Alan was one of your unionists who stood up in one of those assemblies and then read everybody the Riot Act. So that is also true. So we can't say, oh well, since 2012, people were not pulling. We have to say, well, yes, there was a slowdown because of the electoral concerns, the limitations of the Communist Party, clearly. And one more thing I think that needs to be said that is a little separate from this is that the debt issue is really, really important. The money has to stop leaving the country. This is what's going to stop this humanitarian catastrophe. Debt payments have to stop. Now, regardless of what agreement is reached in the future. I think that's...
They haven't paid anything yet.
Right.
Then Natina, sure.
I'm going to pick up on this point about debt. And I think it is often said that the debt issue... Sure. The debt issue is a technical issue. And I want to make a case for why it's a political issue. I think I made some of that case in my talk earlier. So the memorandum was something that Greek elites also complied to. In fact, they used it to restructure their home economy. German and other European elites were never tested really on the debt issue because Greek elites didn't challenge them on it. This is the first test of really challenging them on it, and we're seeing these certain kinds of blackmail techniques with the ECB now refusing to accept Greek bonds as collateral used in a political way. And I think on the left we need to start identifying when economic tools are used politically. In terms of Plan B, I agree too that you need popular support, and in fact, to be very honest, I've actually measured in my opinion about exit. I used to agree with a lot of friends who I do have in Andalusia who talked about exiting here and now. And if you don't have people on your side, it is very difficult to do something so massive with so many constraints without people turning out on the streets. And that's why at the end of the talk I proposed a way that you can start talking to people about it. Because in the same way that you have to deal with the debt issue with such rapidity, you also have to deal with starting to get people to think about alternatives. And to just, I don't really want to adjudicate the role of Andalusia. What I will say, based on having lived there between 2012 and 2013, is that it has a big base in the universities. In fact, larger than Syriza. And I think one of the roles of the left opposition and also of the youth wing of Syriza is to hold these debates in a way that can get people to really grapple with the interests of both sides of society. When I was there were only a few magazines that were really engaging with the Brexit debate. And like I said, I thought that was a moment where Syriza could have at least started talking about it in a more popular way. I hope that it does. I hope that people like Lapavitsas continue to maintain that position, and we'll see from there.
I just want to testify to the movement of Nantina's mind, because when Tom and I met her in Greece...
We can't hear you.
She's just going to embarrass me now.
I want to testify to what Nantina is saying about the change in her thinking, because when Tom and I were in Greece a year ago, we met with
A year and a half
ago. We met with Syriza people and Antarcia people, and so forth, and we had a great discussion late into the night with Nantina and her friends about exactly this question of whether you should lead an exit from the euro or whether you should press your own program, and people learn from experience that it won't work to stay there. So I personally am pleased to see your change, but that's just me.
Well, Joanne, see, this is the influence that you have.
So I'll be quick. I know that people probably have questions. I just want to say, it's a historical question at this stage of the game, but I disagree that the coalition with the NEL, this is a perspective of the DEA comrades as well, that it was a necessity. That it seems clear, and I do think that in a lot of ways the way it was handled sort of let the KK, the Communist Party, off the hook. I think it was possible to have what they call a vote of tolerance, to have a minority government on the basis of a minimal program, on the basis of what they call a vote of tolerance, and to really put the pressure on the Communist Party and force them to support a basic program of anti-austerity, or face the wrath of a second election. That's a historical question at that stage, but I think it goes to the issue of whether the choice to go into government with a NEL was a tactical one or represents something more strategic. And I think there's a concern that it's a bigger strategic orientation. Look, in the very short period of time the government's been in power, there's been some important things done, the reversal of the privatization of the port, the rehiring of the cleaners, some very important symbolic moves around the issues of reparations and the visit to the memorial of the resistance fighters, and some important statements about immigrant rights and the rights of what are essentially the dreamers in Greece, the native-born children of immigrants in Greece, and promises of free electricity to low-income people. At the same time, we need to think about this. What if the decision to go into government with a NEL does represent something more strategic? There are other things we need to be looking out for in the future, and we just need to be. I know, for example, one of the concerns, and this is a rumor at this stage, I don't want to, but the question of who's going to be proposed to be the president of the Greek Republic. There's been a lot of concern that some of the former leadership of New Democracy, for example, might be proposed by Tsipras, and this is a sort of undercurrent of debate around this issue. And so there's a real question as to what the decision to go into government with a NEL represents going forward. So.
Okay, I want to thank the audience for your patience, but I think it was worth it to sort of get some of the issues aired. So I'm going to take questions from the audience. You don't have to limit yourself to questions. You can make comments, but 3 minutes, and you saw what happened to Alan. Okay, so let me see some hands. Nick.
Thank you. Do I just stand up and talk?
I guess you have to come to the mic, right, because nobody will hear us.
Thank you.
Yes, Aaron, I really have to disagree with how you presented this with the coalition, because the fact is, let's reintroduce the Greek people or the Greek electorate into this discussion. They did not vote on January 25th an absolute majority for Syriza. They voted 35% for Syriza, 42% for the left, about 12% for center-left who are pro-austerity, and about 12% for right-wing anti-austerity, including, unfortunately, the Nazis. So this is what you have to deal with. Syriza has 149 seats, and this is an illusion to think that minority governments can be sustained in the Greek political environment, especially minority government of the radical left that's going to be attacked from the first day by the entire establishment, the media, the international so-called community, the elites. So they had 4 choices, and they were all rotten, and the only choice available was the independent Greeks. So they went with that, because, and you want to put the blame on somebody, put it on Communist Party and KKE, who made Syriza before the election into their main enemy. They made that very clear, that they were not going to have any kind of coalition. Otherwise, PASOK and Potami are both a joke.
1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute, thank you. I want to say that, I'm very skeptical about Syriza, but what I've seen in the last 10 days has been absolutely remarkable, the way they navigated the domestic landscape in Greece to try to get allies. And starting right away from the beginning of immediately forming a government and not allowing it to be a crisis situation, because you might still not have a government if they haven't made that decision, but instead they went straight ahead and they immediately challenged the EU and the debt, and I think it's been very successful right now. They're winning allies, because if you want to leave the euro, if you want to break the debt, you need to get more support than Syriza started out with after the election. If an election was today, Syriza would have that majority without a doubt.
Do I see any female hand, I'm sorry, do I see any women's hands out there? Jared.
Probably could have been heard from back there. I really do have a question. It seems to me that what happened on January 25th is that the left won an election, but it doesn't really control power. And what brought Syriza to the point of winning an election has been the social mobilizations and the strikes. And that a victory against the forces of the right that many of you have talked about, this tension, is not going to happen in Parliament, it's going to happen outside of Parliament. And so I guess I want to understand, what is it, while these debates are happening about the here and now for the debt, what is happening on the ground to reformulate and reconstitute these social mobilizations that will be the absolute necessary leverage for the working class to actually put forward a program against austerity and ultimately win? Because that's of course, it seems to me, a central question. And then correlation to that is, of course, the existence of the deep state, the existence of the Delta Force of paramilitaries that went after the strikes and the social mobilizations. What is, people talk about a coup. I mean, frankly, I think playing language like that is a little premature. What is the conversation on the left in terms of dealing with that deep state that persists in Greece?
Can people hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good.
No.
Can people hear me now?
No, Charlie, because you won't be recorded.
Can everyone hear me?
Charlie, you won't be recorded if you
That's
don't.
fine.
No, it's not fine, there are people who are listening. Come on.
My question is this. It follows up
What is your question?
I'll repeat.
If
If you want to do it like that, please just repeat the question when he's done.
I really don't care. Can people hear me now? Can I be picked up on the microphone?
Yes.
My question, and it follows up on the last question, is for whatever reason, this government has come to power in a period of declining mass struggle. Whatever the reason that is. And the question I have is, given that I agree with the last speaker, this is going to be decided in the streets, not in the parliament. The question I have is, what is the capacity of the left platform at Syriza and Syriza to actually mobilize working people? What are their base in the trade unions, whether private or public sector, white collar or blue collar, in actual immigrant communities, etc., to be able to bring some power to bear when, in fact, the international community does cramp down on even the most mild anti-austerity measures?
I guess
This is a, I guess like the saying goes, I'm asking for something completely different. Because this is not a question, it is a comment. And I think there needs to be some basic truths spoken here. The class character of Syriza is bourgeois. The class character of their coalition government, including with the right-wing anti-immigrant NL group, is bourgeois. To call for a vote to Syriza, whether explicitly, as the speaker from the ISO or the CWI did, or implicitly, as Antarcia does, is a betrayal of the interests of the working class of Greece that further ties them to their capitalist class enemy. This is not a step forward, but an obstacle to win the workers to socialist revolution. The Greek masses voted for Syriza in the hopes of getting some relief from EU austerity. They will be disappointed because this bourgeois government is beholden to the European, centrally German imperialists and their banks. And it was the job of socialists to tell them that truth from day one. Syriza doesn't oppose the EU. It wants to stay in the EU, which is an imperialist conglomeration. It merely wants to renegotiate the terms of oppression. I am, in case you haven't guessed, speaking from the Spartacist League, U.S. section of the International Communist League, and our comrades in Greece, the Trotskyist group of Greece, said no vote to Syriza, no vote to Antarcia, down with the imperialist EU, and underlined that the only way forward lies in class struggle and the fight for international socialist revolution and a socialist United States of Europe. In that light, we did give critical support to the KKE, or the Communist Party of Greece, not least because this election they drew a crude class line and said they opposed the EU, wanted Greece out of the EU, and actually tried to win people over to that perspective, and said no vote to Syriza. A coalition government, as is being proposed here, is a popular front government. It is a government that would subordinate the workers to the capitalists, and that is what's criminal.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a
3 minutes to go.
I have 30 seconds.
I have 30 seconds.
On the far left, where it's not democracy.
Our vote was critical. We denounced the KKE for the fact that they did not mobilize their mass working class base on behalf of trying to stop the fascists.
Thank you.
And that's what's necessary. So if you want the truth, pick up our paper, Workers' Vanguard, and learn what is happening in Greece and what is the way forward to fight against imperialist austerity.
No support to bourgeois government.
I guess my question would be, how would we compare similarities? I'm going to mention the things that we know of going on here in the United States. The 15 hours for the $15 an hour minimum wage, with decarceration, and Black Lives Matter. I mean, Code Pink for international peace. Environmental concerns like Monsanto and other related matters. What are the best comparisons and differences to what is going on in Greece? What are some of their major causes? And what I guess some of their organizations and chapters? What do you know them to be doing differently and similarly between their economy and our economy? I know austerity is obviously a big concern in our economy, obviously, as well. If you could talk a little bit more about that.
Laura is active as I am in the Green Party, and certainly the questions of the parallels between our struggles, weaker though they are, with what's going on in Greece is important. Okay, I'm going to now give the speakers a chance to answer quickly, and then the rest, please come up afterwards. And I'm going to go in the order that you spoke initially, so Natasha can be first, if you want.
Well, I'll address a few of the questions. Yes. The issue of the president that actually was discussed by you, Aaron. We don't know. Yet there hasn't been any formal proposal. We hear a lot of rumors from here and there. I cannot speak therefore of who they're going to choose for president. The idea though behind some of the choices that have been proposed, which are probably members of the New Democracy. The idea is that, first of all, the position of the president is just a figurehead. It's not important. It doesn't have any power in deciding. So the idea was that they wanted. There is one suggestion to put a person from New Democracy in order to broaden the basis, in order to reach out to the electorate of New Democracy, to show that there are no rifts between the base of the parties. But really, this is just a conjecture because we don't really know who they are going to suggest for the government. I think that's.
Okay, before we go to the next one, I hear a rumor that our comrades from Podemos are here. If somebody is, would they please come up and just say it?
Okay, well, this is going to be very, very short. I just wanted to thank you on behalf of Podemos in the United States for organizing this interesting event. And also, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate our colleagues from Syriza on their recent victory, because we didn't have the time to congratulate. And we trust in their desire to improve the situation of Greece in their work, and we will try to learn and cooperate in this new adventure that we are heading. I will need this microphone before asking you to like us in Facebook. Our website is Podemos, EEUU, so E is Mexico, E is Mexico, U is University, U is University. And follow us on Twitter at Podemos, EEUU. We're preparing some events this month, and we would love to have you all there. So thank you very much, everyone, for
We'll have to continue this discussion. But the important questions that came up. It's very good, the point. It was an election, but not in power. In reality, this government imploded, New Democracy. And so on. And actually the fact that it was a very restrained reaction from the masses on the night of the victory even, there were only 5,000 people at the center of Athens celebrating. It was not a mass celebration. Actually the next week had 300,000 in the streets of Madrid, celebrating in many ways, electrifying. The victory of Syriza, in effect, had a bigger effect at this point internationally rather than internally, because the level of expectations, and I will explain that, because that's a reality rather than the la la land that some people live in terms of what is actually happening. Greece had 34 strikes, mass occupations, the movement of the square, record amount of tear gas and beatings took place. It was a colossal movement of resistance, but it was defeated. All the measures of austerity actually passed, and so on. And that is the reality. And it's a classic situation where the movement moved from the industrial front or the movement of the streets to the electoral front to try to defeat this government of New Democracy. And the vehicle they chose, the masses chose, as their reaction against neoliberalism and against capitalism at this particular, it was Syriza. That's actually the reality, the facts of life in terms of what this party represents. And I think we have to understand that is, at the moment. But that, however, event changes the situation, changes the balance of forces, and will open the space for the movements to re-emerge. But there are problems in terms of the left. In many ways, the left is split. It's fighting each other in many instances. Doesn't have a clear program and a clear way forward. And I think that is going to be part of the reconstitution of the movements and a new left, a harder left in the next period. It's going to carry the movement forward. And I think that's one of the debates, and some of the points I thought Nandina made, which are extremely significant, that we have to address, is the issue of the real debate that's taking place. There's a real debate, in many ways, among the realist wing that says it really reflects a kind of left Keynesian, to use that, they use a bit of academic, I don't like using academic language, but this is the kind of, if there is a left Keynesian view that says, why can't they see that's in ultimately the benefits even of the capitalist system itself to try to, and they don't see that the reality, actually, that is actually not true. Actually, the capitalists will resist, and Germany and imperialism will resist to the very end, because they realize if they make concessions to Greece at the present time, any concessions, that will open Pandora's box in the next period in terms of the demands of the Spanish proletariat, in terms of Italy and a whole series of countries in Europe that will demand an end to austerity and an end to the attacks that are taking place. I want to remind people, because a lot of the hot air of the ultra-left that comes up, and it will come up again and again about the state of affairs. I want to remind people that actually, real movements actually start from simple demands. People confuse, of course, February and October typically, but actually, it starts from even small demands that appear reasonable and so on. For example, you have in 1917 in Russia, you had the demand in February of saying we want to appeal to the Tsar, it was to just grant us a little bit of a reprieve they were demanding. It was a perfectly little demand, but it was opening the floodgates of the movement. The same with the civil rights movement, such a simple demand. And so why can't you be reasonable? Why can't we reason about this? And yet the implications actually, because it sets the masses in motion where they can actually learn lessons. I will finish on this because I want people to get a bit of a flavor of what the European bourgeoisie, since our brother here wants to use the fancy French words, is doing. They don't know what they're fucking with in Greece. I will tell you this, as somebody who comes from a family that has given victims to the struggle, they don't know what they're playing with fire at the present time. These are the people who actually in the course of the German occupation went on general strikes. These are the people that gave the highest ratio of deaths in the course of the Second World War in terms of hunger and so on. This was a movement that actually liberated, during the Nazi occupation, 3/4 of the country with the most successful, arguably, guerrilla movement before it was stabbed in the back by the Stalinists at that stage. They don't know what they're fucking with in the next period. No matter what, actually, even Tsipras, and I say this as a member of Syriza, in many ways, the decisive issues in the next period about the process of the Greek and European revolution will be decided on the streets in terms of the masses re-entering the scene of history, starting from perfectly reasonable little demand. Why can't we have a little less austerity? And yet that demand is going to be what's going to set Europe afire in the next period. Thank you.
I really cannot I agree with the opinion that the labor movement in Greece has been defeated when it has installed the first radical left government since Chile. I find that a very hard statement to swallow. So I just can't go down that road. But what happens now is tremendously important. If the movements are not reignited, because you're right, they are on pause. I don't think we've lost. People waited for the election. They're giving some time to Syriza, the government, to see how it will handle the debt issue. Those struggles are going to start picking up. And as Sherry's question was, what are the concrete next steps? The concrete next step is on February 11. We will try to reopen ERT. It has worked as a movement's media since it was shut down in 2013, broadcasting the movement's demand, and now we have to return the favor. So that's the next step. And then after that, the anti-fascist struggle continues, because there is still a serious threat of fascism in Greece, and an election cannot finish that. So that's what I think about that.
I'll address quickly the question of social mobilizations and Syriza's case. I think we have to look at long trajectory of social movements in Greece, starting with the student occupations of 2006 to 2007, into 2008, where youth basically took over the streets of Athens for a month, then into 2010, the general strikes, 2007, Syriza. And Syriza was very important because it showed that even where in a country where the private sector has a union rate of no more than 15%, people are willing to experiment with new forms of organization. And Syriza and other parts of the left, including Adersia, show their willingness to engage with that. And I think now's the challenge to take those kinds of organization mixed with the more kind of sectoral leverage that you get with unions to give really the government the kind of leverage that it needs. In terms of Syriza's base in unions, it's not the kind of base that we traditionally identify with social democratic governments of the post-war period, or even of the Communist Party in Greece, historically. But I think Syriza activists are working very hard to build that relationship, and they formed a labor federation, Medan, almost in the way that Kukue had formed a labor federation in the 1990s. And I know some activists in that federation, and they joined Syriza after 2012, right? They're not core cadre members. And they joined because they thought that this was really their only hope. So of course they're critical of certain aspects of the official line, but they're trying to organize around that. And I'm just going to put a plug in for a friend, Katie Fox-Hodesh. She's also a graduate student at Berkeley, and she's going to be interviewing one of the Syriza activist members in the Dockworker Union in Piraeus, which, as you know, Syriza has halted the privatization of. And I hope to see that interview soon, because she's going to be asking him questions about Syriza's relationship to the labor movement, and I hope we can see more of that kind of work.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I want to add something to the answer to Charlie's question about the base. I thought Kovalakis had some interesting points about the sort of changing shape of the electorate between 2012 and a couple weeks ago, making the point that that there was significant base of support in 2012 in Turkish-speaking minority constituencies, and some of the kind of core working class constituencies, former PASOK belt, Piraeus, and that's remained. But a lot of the growth, this was the point Kovalakis was making, a lot of the sort of electoral growth this time around represented a sort of broadening of the base in what he called rural and semi-urban areas in middling provincial towns. And he went so far as to characterize its electoral base as one of a cross-class party. And so it's not that the working class base shrank in any significant way, but that the growth, the broadening, represented a kind of a class broadening of its support. I think that could be a good thing. I do have concerns about Natasha's response to the question of offering offering the presidency, this even if it is just a symbolic choice to the leadership of New Democracy. I think there's real questions about what's the process by which you can gain hegemony for the left in Greece. And it's clear, and I agree with Nikos that it doesn't have it. There's a reality on the ground that's just there. But I'm discomfited by the idea that this is going to be gained through coalitions with Enel and handing even symbolic power to former political leaderships of the big bourgeoisie in Greece. Let me just end by where I started originally, which is to really plug the Greece Solidarity, AKNY, and the work that we're doing here in New York. Because if people want to be active and in support of the Greek struggle here in New York, that's really the place to plug in. We have this event on February 11th, which I'm sure Joanna was going to mention. We've also historically done mobilizations on the day of International Day of Anti-Fascist Action in March. There's been some very important work against the Golden Dawn here in the United States. So I really want to encourage people to come and join us, and thank you for coming out.